The junkyard encounter. The junkyard was silent at night. Only the sound of metal creaking in the cold wind. Old machines stood like broken giants, their bodies covered in rust and dust. A man walked slowly between them. Carrying a small bag of food, he came here every evening, looking for things that still had value. He was used to the silence, but that night he heard something different. It was not the sound of metal. It was softer, like a whimper. He stopped, holding his breath. His eyes scanned the shadows between piles of broken ships and old machines. Something moved, very faint, like a weak hand pushing a piece of scrap aside. The man's heart began to beat faster. He thought at first it might be an animal, but then he saw them, a figure crouched low, with strange skin that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Beside her was a smaller figure, trembling. The man realized it was a mother and a child, but not human. The child's eyes were too large, glowing faintly with hunger and fear. The mother held her close as if shielding her from the world. Their clothes were torn, their bodies thin. They looked like they had not eaten in days. The man felt a chill, not of fear but of pity. He knew aliens sometimes came through this place. Some were dangerous, some were only lost. He could not tell which kind these two were. He tightened his grip on his bag. He could walk away, pretend he never saw them. But the sound of the child's stomach growling reached his ears. It was weak, desperate. The man slowly opened his bag. Inside was a small piece of bread and some dried fruit. He had saved it for himself, but his hand hesitated. The alien mother's eyes followed his movement. Her body was tense, ready to protect the child. The man knelt slowly, keeping his distance. He placed the bread on a piece of metal in front of them. Then he stepped back, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. For a long moment, nothing happened. The child looked at the food, then at her mother. The mother shook her head, whispering in a language the man did not know. But the child's hunger was too strong. She crawled forward and took the bread with shaking hands. The man watched quietly, his heart heavy. The mother's eyes never left him, full of suspicion and fear. But when the child bit into the bread, her small face softened with relief. A faint sound, almost like a sigh, escaped the mother's lips. The man knew then he had done the right thing. He stayed for a few minutes. Watching them eat, he did not speak, he did not move closer. He only wanted them to know he was not their enemy. When his food was gone, he nodded once and slowly walked away. But in his heart something had changed as he left the junkyard. He kept hearing the sound of the child chewing. It was a sound of life, fragile but real. He thought about the way the mother had looked at him. Not with gratitude, not yet, but with a question. Why would a human share food with strangers like them? That night, the man lay awake under the broken roof of his shelter. The image of the child's glowing eyes would not leave his mind. He had seen many hungry faces before, but this was different. This was a child who did not belong to his world, yet still suffered the same hunger. He told himself he would not return. It was dangerous to get involved. But even as he said the words in his head, he knew they were lies because deep down he already wanted to see them again. Something inside him whispered that his life was about to change. The junkyard was silent once more. But hidden among the shadows, a mother held her child close. She looked at the place where the human had stood. Her eyes narrowed, confused and uncertain. Was he truly kind, or was this only a trap waiting to close on them? The child, however, did not think of traps. She only whispered softly, holding the last crumb of bread. Her small voice carried through the junkyard air. Warm. Food, she said, her alien tongue mixing with broken human words. The mother shivered because for the first time in many nights, her child did not cry herself to sleep. The man did not know it yet. But this simple act, this small gift of bread, was the beginning of something greater than he could imagine. In the cold junkyard among the broken machines, a fragile thread had been tied between human and alien. And though it was only the first night, that thread would grow stronger with each meeting. Until one day it would no longer be food he gave them, but something far more powerful, a place in his heart and a name they both longed for. Family. The silent bond. The next evening, the man walked back into the junkyard. His steps were heavy, his mind uncertain. He told himself he came only to search for metal, but he knew the truth. His eyes were already searching for them, the alien mother and her child. He wondered if they would still be there, or if they had run away. The junkyard was silent. The shadows long. At first he saw nothing but broken machines. Then from behind a heap of twisted iron, Two glowing eyes appeared. The child, her face half hidden, stared at him. Her mother's hand quickly pulled her back into the dark. The man stopped, his heart beating faster. He reached into his bag, pulling out more food. This time a small piece of cooked meat wrapped in cloth. He placed it carefully on a flat surface and stepped back. For a long time nothing happened. Then slowly, the child crawled out, her small body trembling. The mother hissed in a strange language, her voice sharp with warning. But the child ignored her, hunger stronger than fear. She picked up the meat and smelled it. Her eyes shining with hope, the man stayed still, his hands open at his sides, showing no threat. Finally, the child took a bite. Her face lighting up as she chewed. The mother emerged too, her body tense, her eyes cold. She looked at the man like one might look at a predator. But when she saw her child eating, her gaze softened for a brief moment. The man noticed the lines of exhaustion on her face. She was protecting her child with everything she had left. He wanted to speak, to say he meant no harm, but he stayed silent, knowing words could break the fragile moment. Instead, he nodded once, then turned as if to leave. That was when he heard a sound, soft, hesitant. The child had whispered something in broken human words. More. "Tomorrow?" she asked, her voice small but clear. The man froze, his chest tight with emotion. He looked back and saw the mother's shock. She pulled the child close, scolding her in their own tongue. But the child's eyes never left him. Full of longing, the man gave a small smile. Not too much, just enough. Then he nodded again and walked away. Behind him, the child clutched the last piece of food as if it were treasure. The mother's eyes followed the human until he vanished into the night. Her heart was torn. Could she trust him, or was this all a trick? That night, as the man sat in his shelter, he could not sleep. The child's question echoed in his mind. More tomorrow? He felt something inside him awaken. Something he had long buried. It was not duty, not survival. It was care. The next day, whispers spread through the junkyard. Other scavengers had noticed the man carrying food. They wondered why he risked wasting food on aliens. Some laughed, some cursed. One group of men whispered darkly, saying humans should never trust outsiders. When evening came, the man returned anyway. This time, the mother and child were waiting. The mother stood tall, her eyes full of warning. But the child's face brightened the moment she saw him. She ran forward before her mother could stop her. The man placed food down again, this time fruit and water. The child took it eagerly, drinking with shaking hands. The mother stayed back, watching carefully. Her body was thin, her lips dry, but she refused to touch the food. Pride and fear kept her still, the man noticed. And after a moment, he placed another piece of fruit closer to her. Then he backed away again. The silence was heavy, only broken by the child's soft chewing. The mother's eyes locked with his. It was a silent battle of wills. Her distrust against his quiet patience. Finally, after what felt like forever, she reached out. Her hand trembling, she picked up the fruit. She did not eat it right away, but she held it close. Her eyes never left his face. For the first time, she looked less like a cornered animal, and more like someone trying to understand. The man gave a small nod, and without a word, he turned to leave. Behind him, the mother whispered something in her language. The child looked up, surprised, then smiled. Though the man could not hear the words, he felt their meaning in the air. Something fragile had shifted between them. He did not know it, but the silent bond had begun to grow. Each act of kindness was a seed. Each shared meal was water for that seed, and soon, trust would bloom where only fear had lived before. But trust was a dangerous thing in the junkyard, because others had started to notice. Eyes followed him in the dark. Voices whispered his name. Some were jealous, some were suspicious, and some wanted to know why a human was helping an alien family at all. The man did not know it yet, but his quiet kindness was about to draw enemies closer. Danger in the shadows. The junkyard was never truly empty. Even when silence covered it, eyes were always watching from the shadows. Scrap thieves, hungry wanderers, and worse, men who thrived on fear. The man knew this, but still he kept coming every night. Each evening he carried food. Each evening he left with nothing. At first the scavengers only laughed. "He feeds rats," one said, "alien rats." But as days passed, their laughter turned into whispers. They watched the way the mother and child began to wait for him. They saw the way trust started to grow where fear once lived. Suspicion spread. Why would a human risk his food for outsiders? What debt did he owe them? Or was he planning something they could not see? In the junkyard, Kindness was often mistaken for weakness one night. When the man left the aliens after giving them food, a group of men followed him. They caught him between two broken ships, their eyes cold. "You," one of them growled. "Stop feeding them." The man stood silent, his jaw tight. "They are not our kind," another said, his voice sharp with hate. "They don't belong here. They bring trouble. If you keep helping them, you bring trouble too." The man clenched his fists but said nothing. He only walked past them, his silence louder than any words. But the shadows did not forget. The next evening, the alien mother sensed danger. Her sharp ears picked up the sound of boots moving in the dark. She held her daughter close. Her eyes glowing faintly, the child whispered, "He will come," her small voice full of trust. And he did, carrying food once again. But before he could reach them, stones were thrown. They landed near his feet. Rolling across the junk, voices called from the dark, mocking and threatening. "Go home, fool! Or do you want to die with your pets?" The man ignored them, moving toward the mother and child. The mother hissed, pulling her daughter behind her. Her eyes searched the shadows. She had lived long enough to know when death was close, and tonight death was circling, waiting. The man placed food down quickly, his movements sharp. "Eat," he whispered softly, even though he knew they might not understand. But his calm voice made the child's fear ease a little. The mother, however, shook her head. She could not understand why he kept risking himself. From the dark, the scavengers stepped closer, their faces twisted with greed and suspicion. One man carried a broken pipe. Another had a sharp piece of metal. They were not here to talk anymore. They were here to warn him with blood. The man stood in front of the mother and child, his body between them and the attackers. His heart pounded, but he did not move aside. "This is not your fight," one of the scavengers spat. "They are nothing to you. Step away." The man's voice was low, steady. "They are hungry," he said. "That is enough." The words were simple, but they carried power. The scavengers sneered. One raised his weapon. The air grew tight. The junkyard waiting to see blood. Then something unexpected happened. The alien mother stepped forward, her hand glowing faintly. Strange symbols shimmered across her skin like fire. The men froze, fear flashing in their eyes. They had mocked her before, but now they saw a hint of her true strength. The man glanced back at her, shocked. She had power, but she was weak from hunger and wounds. If she fought now, it might kill her. He knew then. He could not let her fight alone. He tightened his fists and stepped closer to the men. "Go," he said, his voice cold. "You want scrap? Take it. You want food? Take mine, but you will not touch them." The silence that followed was heavy. The scavengers looked at each other, uncertain. Finally, one spat on the ground and muttered, "This is not over." They faded back into the shadows, leaving behind the taste of threat. The man's shoulders dropped with relief. But he knew. They would return, and next time they would not stop so easily. The child ran forward, clutching his leg. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Safe." The mother pulled her back quickly, her pride still strong. But her eyes met his for the first time without anger. There was something new there, respect mixed with fear. The man turned to leave, his body aching from tension. The junkyard swallowed him in darkness. Behind him, the mother held her daughter tight. Her voice trembled as she whispered in her own tongue, "This human. Why does he fight for us?" The child only smiled, holding the last piece of bread. Her answer was simple. "Because he is family," she whispered. The mother's heart shook, her chest heavy with emotions she could not name, and in the shadows danger waited sharper than ever. Because the junkyard had rules and breaking them meant war, the man had chosen his side, and soon the price of kindness would be paid in blood. The sacrifice. The junkyard was colder than usual that night. The wind carried dust and the smell of rust. The man walked with a heavy step, his bag filled with food and something more. Inside was a small blanket, old but clean. He had found it after days of searching, repaired it with his own hands. He thought of the child shivering every night, her thin body curling against her mother for warmth. He thought of the mother's tired eyes, always watching, always guarding. He knew food was not enough anymore. Tonight he would give them more, comfort, protection, a piece of care. When he reached the usual place, the child was already waiting. Her glowing eyes widened with joy. She ran to him before her mother could stop her. The man knelt, placing the food down first. Then he slowly pulled the folded blanket from his bag. The child gasped softly, touching the fabric with wonder. She had never felt something so soft. The mother rushed forward, her hand snapping out to grab the blanket. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What is this?" Her voice demanded, though he could not understand the words, but he understood the fear in her tone. He shook his head gently, pointing to the child. He spread the blanket on the ground, showing it was harmless. Then he stepped back, raising his hands. The child clutched the fabric and hugged it tightly, smiling for the first time. The mother's eyes softened, but only for a moment, because from the shadows, danger moved again. The scavengers had returned, more of them this time. Their faces were hard, their eyes full of greed and hate. One shouted, "There! Feeding them again!" The man turned, his jaw tight. The child froze in fear. Pressing into her mother's arms, the scavengers spread out, cutting off every path of escape. Their leader stepped forward, holding a sharp iron bar. "No more gifts? No more food," he snarled. "You choose them. You lose everything." The man stood tall, his voice steady. "They are not your enemies," he said. "They are only hungry." The men laughed, harsh and cruel. "Hungry mouths turn into sharp teeth," one said. "Better to end them now," the mother hissed, her hands glowing faintly again. The man knew she was ready to fight, but he also knew her body was weak. If she fought, she would not survive. The scavengers stepped closer, the iron bar raised. The man's fist clenched. This time, he would not step aside. He moved forward, placing himself directly in front of the mother and child. The leader sneered. "You would fight us? For them?" The man's eyes burned with quiet fire. "Yes," he said, his voice cold. "I will." The silence was heavy. Then the fight began. The first blow came fast, striking his side. Pain exploded, but he did not fall. He pushed back, his fists striking with desperate strength. The scavengers swarmed him, iron and fists clashing against flesh. The child screamed, the mother cried out. But the man refused to step away. Every strike he took, he stood again. Every hit only pushed him harder to protect them. Blood dripped from his lip, his body ached. But still he blocked the path with his own frame. He was only one man, but he fought like a wall. The mother's eyes widened, her chest tight with emotion she could not hold. She had seen warriors before, she had seen soldiers die, but never had she seen a human stand with such stubborn courage. He was not their kin, not their blood, yet he shielded them as if they were his own. At last he fell to his knees, his breath ragged. The scavenger leader raised the iron bar for a final strike. The child screamed louder, breaking into sobs. The mother's power flared, glowing brighter than before. Symbols burned across her skin, fire dancing in the night. The scavengers froze in fear, stumbling back. The mother stepped forward, her voice like thunder in her alien tongue. The ground itself seemed to shake. Her hidden strength, suppressed for so long, burst out like a storm. And in that storm stood the human. Broken but unyielding, she reached for him, her hands trembling, her eyes no longer cold, no longer full of suspicion. Instead, they were wide with awe. He had given everything, even his own blood, to protect them. And something inside her broke. Her wall of distrust shattered. The scavengers fled into the shadows. Fear carried them away, leaving silence behind. The mother knelt beside the man, placing the blanket over him instead of her child. Her voice shook as she whispered words he could not understand. But her tears told the truth. This was no longer about survival. The child crawled forward, holding his hand tightly. "Family," she whispered again, her voice soft but strong. The man's chest rose and fell, his breath shallow, but when he heard the word, he forced a faint smile. Even beaten, even bleeding, he had won something greater than survival. The junkyard was no longer just a place of broken machines. It was the place where sacrifice created a bond stronger than fear, a bond that would change them all forever. A family born in the junkyard. The night after the fight, the junkyard was silent. The stars shone above, cold and distant. The man lay weak under the broken roof of his shelter, his body bruised, his breath heavy, yet his heart was calm because he knew they were safe. The alien mother sat beside him, her daughter curled in her arms. The blanket he had given them now covered all three. She looked at him in silence, her sharp eyes no longer filled with suspicion. Instead, they carried something new. Respect, sorrow, and gratitude. Her fingers trembled as she touched his wounds, trying to heal what she could. For the first time, she whispered soft words in broken human speech. "Why? You protect? she asked, her voice quiet and unsure. The man's lips moved slowly, his voice weak. Because no one should suffer alone, he said. The words were simple, but they struck her heart like thunder. The child leaned closer, holding his hand with both of hers. Her small voice whispered again. The word she loved most, family, she said, smiling through tears. The man's eyes closed, his lips curling in a faint smile. The mother looked down, shaken, because her child had chosen this human as kin. The next morning, the junkyard was not silent. The scavengers returned, angry and armed. They brought more men, shouting that the human had broken the rules. Their leader's face was twisted with rage. No alien stays here. No human betrays his kind. The mother stood, her body weak but her power burning beneath her skin. The child clung to her leg, trembling. The man pushed himself to his feet. Though his wounds ached, he stood tall once more, even when his body begged him to fall. This time he did not stand alone. The mother stepped beside him, her glowing marks lighting the dark. The child held the blanket like a flag of hope. Together they faced the crowd. The scavengers hesitated, fear in their eyes. They had seen the mother's hidden strength. They had seen the man's stubborn courage. The leader shouted again, trying to break their spirit. "You cannot fight us all," he screamed. But the man's voice cut through the night. "Steady and calm. Then let them come," he said. "Because I will never move." The mother's voice joined his, sharp and powerful. "Nor will I," she declared, her alien tongue ringing like steel. The air grew heavy, a storm of tension pressing down. The scavengers shuffled, uncertain. They saw not just a man and two aliens. They saw something greater, a family forged in fire. And for the first time they stepped back. The leader cursed and spat, retreating into the shadows. The others followed, their courage broken. Silence fell again. But this time it was not fear that filled the junkyard. It was victory, quiet but undeniable. The man sank to his knees, exhausted, but his heart was steady. The mother knelt beside him. Placing her hand on his shoulder, she whispered something in her own language. Though he did not understand the words, he felt their weight. They were words of belonging, of trust. And then she said in broken human speech, "You are one of us." The child wrapped the blanket around all three of them. Her glowing eyes shining with joy, she pressed her forehead to his and whispered again. "Family," she said. And this time her mother did not correct her. Instead, the mother lowered her head in silence. Accepting the word too from that night on, the junkyard was no longer just a place of broken things. It became their home, their shelter, their bond. The man no longer walked alone every evening. The child held his hand every night. The mother watched him with eyes that carried trust instead of fear. And the scavengers? They never tried again. Because word spread quickly of the human who fought for aliens, and the alien who stood beside him with fire in her blood. People whispered of them in fear, in awe. A strange story of enemies who became something far more dangerous. Family. In the silence of the junkyard, surrounded by rust and stars, 3 broken lives had found each other. And in that meeting, they discovered something stronger than hunger. Stronger than fear, stronger than hate. They discovered the truth that even in the darkest places, kindness could create light. The man smiled as the child leaned against him. The mother sat close, her pride now softened by trust, and in that moment, he knew. He was no longer just a wanderer in a world of rust. He was part of something greater, something unbreakable, a family born in the junkyard, a family that would face whatever shadows came next, together.